Ooh, Pachamama. Thank you for joining me for the very first episode of Laurelann's Gaia-logues. I know that's awfully cutesy and clever. That's sometimes how I like to play with words, so I hope you'll just enjoy that with me for a while. So I'm super excited about this whole partnership that has emerged to be able to be in partnership with the Gaia Media Company, which for me, is pretty much the only media company that is actually striving to consciously make our collective consciousness arrive at a point that is more elevated, more compassionate, more enlightened. So to be able to share some of their content and to be able to talk about it and to be able to be in dialogue with it is something that really excites me. So I'm really happy to be here. And I just was perusing what their current offerings are and what their current promotions are. And when I saw that Joe Dispenza's work was sort of on their list of, primary work that they're promoting right now, I was just so delighted. Because here's the funny thing. I didn't realize until I started watching his series, Rewired with Joe Dispenza, which we're talking about now. I didn't realize that I had seen him in What the Bleep Do We Know so many years ago, when I think me and so many others were starting to, try to get our tentacles out there and antenna out there to see how do we establish our pathways of consciousness in meaningful, intentional ways. So he was in that. And I didn't know that, and people were talking about him, Joe Dispenza this, Joe Dispenza that, and everybody was just, enamored with him. And when I came back to him after forgetting that I had seen him in What the Bleep, I was reminded that the thing that really resonates with me, literally, with Joe Dispenza is that he is a medical doctor and he is a scientist. And so he comes to this field, the field of consciousness, the field of connectedness, the field of how we collectively work both individually and collectively towards a better humanity. And, his premise is very simple. When you change your thoughts, you change your reality. I'm just going to say that one more time. When you change your thoughts, you change your reality. And he talks about this sort of path that I have written down here in my notes. When you create new thoughts, you then start to make new choices, which then leads you to new behaviors, which then leads you to have new emotions, which then new experiences, which then leads you to new emotions and feelings. And then those new emotions and feelings lead to new thoughts. And when we are on a sort of upward cycle of that, as opposed to a downward spiral, it becomes sort of easier once we begin that process of shaping our cycles into that upward flow, as opposed to what many of us have encountered before, which is being so stuck in the inability to get out of that downward spiral that you just don't even know how to shift gears. So he talks about it really just beginning in a very small way with the thoughts. And I want to also just kind of talk a little bit about how I'm approaching this as the host of this show, as the person who's interested in this. I sort of come at it with a twofold or even a threefold approach. On the one hand, I spent a lot of time in academia, right? I have a PhD, I did the dissertation, I got the t-shirt, all that stuff. And so I understand why and how academics and scientists have to talk in the languages that they speak in order to address factual reality that people who want tangible proof need to see or hear. And at the same time, I also am very much a visual person, and I am a media maker and a theater maker, a performance maker, a singer-songwriter. And so when I did my dissertation, which my dissertation was all about critical autoethnography, and it's really about how we ask the questions of what is the culture of me? What are the various influences that affect the culture of me? And how can I consciously and critically examine those influences that have made the culture of me and decide for myself which ones I want to call into my life and which ones I want to dismantle, right? So on the one hand, as an academic, I have come from that field, which is rooted in personal transformation. We don't call it that in academia. In academia, that's sort of a little bit too woo-woo for folks. But what I learned after I finished my PhD was that critical autoethnography actually kind of saved my life when I was at the worst of my worst existential crisis. And the funny thing is, those practices of critical autoethnography, they are rooted in their very beginning and all through them in the act of observation. Specifically, in the observation of the self, of ourselves. And when you look at what any of these people, Joe Dispenza or any of the folks who are working in this sort of mindfulness or raising your consciousness or whatever you want to call it, the state of being able to be an observer in your own life is pretty much the key to everything. And that, of course, is going to come through in a meditation practice, which that's going to come in later into one of his episodes in the Rewired series, which we'll talk about later. But right now, we're just talking about the introduction. And before we go any further, I want to just play you a little clip that I've been given permission to share about some of the information that he's talking about in his series. So let me share that with you now.
My job as a doctor for 31 years, as well as a lecturer, author, and researcher, is to not just talk about what is possible, but to show you the latest data that supports my work. That your thoughts can have an effect on your brain, your body, and your life.
And I just thought, the power that made the body heals the body. So I made a deal with myself. I thought, if I'm ever able to walk again, I promise myself that I'll spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter.
And that intelligence that's giving us life, that's keeping our heart beating and digesting our food, that runs through the autonomic nervous system, it is the greatest healer in the world. All we have to do is get out of the way. You see the brain starting to move into a more holistic state, and those brain waves become highly coherent, and all of a sudden the person starts to feel connected to something greater.
So that's just a little sample of what Joe Dispenza has for you if you sign up for Gaia. And I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about this idea of coherence, because he talks about that already in this introductory episode. And I really love the way he speaks about coherence, because he speaks of it as a rhythmic alignment. And I also would add to that a harmonic alignment. And both of those things are going to be vibrational alignments. So when your rhythms are aligned with the rhythms of the universe, when you are in harmony with the universe, when those things are cohering, that is when the magic happens. And I say that because having trained as a shaman, after having been an academic, there are things that we call magic. And my friends and I who trained in shamanism, who, we regularly keep in touch with each other, our little shaman community, we do talk about magic happening all the time. Because actually, magic is happening all the time if you just stop and look around and pay attention. Because on the one hand, magic is just science that hasn't been explained yet, right? And magic is also synchronistic moments that begin to occur when we begin to let go. And for me, as a bit of an organizer and a control freak and a recovering workaholic, letting go is perhaps the hardest part of the process. But when he talks about this as being a scientifically proven method for taking your life into what he calls possibilities. When you think about your memories, that's in the past. When you feel your emotions are usually linked to things that have happened in the past. And so what he's doing in this series, which is all about rooting yourself in the act of observation, which is, again, what I learned in my PhD program. When you are in that sort of coherence, you change your life and you change your reality. And for me personally, this has happened in waves, and it has happened in some ways that are sort of like really beautiful, and also ways that are, I didn't realize I was going to have to go through that harrowing experience. We think that, I shouldn't say we think. I thought that once I was on this path of enlightenment, that everything was just going to be easy peasy for the rest of my life. But no, it's not easy peasy for the rest of our lives. However, once you go through the kind of crisis that causes you to react in a way that really re-examines everything, it's very liberating. And what I think it does is it allows us to much more consciously choose how we want to live our reality. And he talks about it as starting by thinking differently, doing differently, and then you suddenly find that you are being differently. So I am here for us to begin to imagine new possibilities. I think that there are many, many incredible phenomena that have happened in our history of mankind, of humanity, of civilization, that began as impossibilities. They begin as impossibilities until someone makes them happen. And my favorite example is to look at the abolishment of slavery. People thought that that wasn't possible. Well, it did end up being possible. We did abolish slavery. And now people think it's impossible to abolish the prison industrial complex. It might seem impossible, but with the efforts to create a coherent society, one that cares for each other, one that takes that commitment to the collective well-being seriously, that is where the magic happens on a social level. So that is the introduction to episode 1 of Rewired with Joe Dispenza in Gaia-logues. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start really bringing in how this relates to what I've learned as an academic in critical autoethnography and what that means for personal transformation. Also, what I learned in shamanic energy medicine, studying with the Four Winds Society. And I really am very interested in finding that beautiful balance between giving ourselves enough scientific evidence to say that we cannot deny this is true any longer, and allowing ourselves the freedom to embrace possibility and see where we can allow the flow of magic to happen into our lives. So I hope you will join me. And what I'm going to do in the comments is I'm going to put the link. If you're interested and you want to start watching these series and then join me for this dialogue, please sign up through my link. It is an affiliate link. And so when you sign up there, you are supporting this channel. You're supporting this work that I do. If you really love it, please like it and subscribe it and share it. If you really, really, really love it, I've got a link in there also for my virtual tip jar. You can donate any dollar amount in increments of $5. So please like, subscribe, share, donate if you like it, and definitely sign up for Gaia, because that is where we are going to use media for the purposes of raising our collective consciousness. Have a good one.